This is Patricia Windrow at the Cable Easel, coming to you every week for a lesson in painting and drawing. I devote myself to working from life. I think that anybody who's watched this show for any amount of time knows that. And so I bring in setups, props, things that I own, things that I find in the markets, things I find in the supermarket, I mean in the thrift shops and so forth, and in antique shops. And so I brought in something with a sort of a flavor of the season, and it's got some nice rich colors. The red and the green of the season seems to be very intriguing at this time of year, but I've avoided the cliches that I'm afraid one finds so often around now, and so I brought in, there are a few cliches there of course, but I brought in a rather nice copper kettle which has Paul Revere's signature stamped on it. I doubt that he stamped it, but nevertheless it's there. And a little bit of my own homegrown holly sticking in it, with an odd-looking piece of something or other, which is now known as a white turnip, and then a burning candle, a little Russian jewelry box, which I own and which I thought would look rather handsome next to all these pieces. And so I'm beginning on a blank, well, kind of blank. I was sort of playing around before the show began with some drawing of the placement and the layout of this particular composition. And composition is something that I find not very many people talk about. So I've just sort of begun to place these things down here. I'm working on a piece of ordinary canvas that has not even been stretched. It's very much like this canvas, which I take with me when I'm on a trip. I roll canvas up and I work on it pinned to a board as I'm out in traveling, and it's much more lightweight. Of course, it takes a tremendous less amount of room, and you stretch these as you come when you come back from trips. What I'm doing now is to show you that working on a piece of canvas which can be rolled, of course after it's dry, and then transported very safely, and then when you get back you stretch it, and I will take up the stretching business at another time on another program, how to stretch your own canvases with paintings on them. I'll use that one as a matter of fact so that you can see exactly what I'm talking about. But getting back to the task at hand, which is this composition of objects which are ordinary. They are not complicated. A piece of red velvet is available just about anywhere if you go to a fabric shop. And selection is what I think probably is one of the more important things of my kind of painting, because I work from life. I don't make it up out of my head. I don't copy other photographs. I don't copy other people's paintings. I create my own, which means that I find my own subjects. I'm working with what I always call dirty turpentine, which is instead of charcoal, because I don't believe in charcoal drawing these things either. So being rebellious about many accepted techniques, here is mine. I use a rather fine brush, a lot of turpentine, and the umber, which I usually probably use more times than not. I'm going to, I placed this, I'm placing these foreground pieces because I'm very many times asked the question, how do you place pieces and how do you get them the right size? Well, the best idea is to, if you don't have any idea of how to do it as an overall pattern, in other words, great big sweeping movements, find the object that is in the foreground first and establish its size. When you establish the size of the object in the foreground, for the most part, the rest of it will have to come out in that proportion, because I use points of reference as the way to find out how big things are. So directly behind this, here's the stem of the apple. Directly behind that comes the side of the kettle. This is my placement point of where the kettle goes to the apple. It goes on this side of the stem. Finding all of these objects and their component parts is what makes for proportion in layout. So if you take the object in the foreground and give it a size, you will be able to pretty much determine the size of the rest of it. If you started out with an enormous, huge turnip and apple, you would find yourself out of the canvas with the rest of the composition. So I always suggest that you remember to work slightly under life size. It is very difficult to do if you have a transferring mind of how you're going to transfer these objects to the second dimension from the third dimension, the chances are you're going to stick pretty much to life size. So keeping it under life size is rather difficult. I'll probably fail myself this way. I find that even in portraiture it's very difficult to keep things under life size. They usually tend to get much bigger. Now, I'm assuming that the people who watch this program have some feeling about drawing, and if they don't, then they must try to do something about learning how to draw, because if you don't draw, it is pointless for you to begin painting. Putting paint on a bad drawing should be thought about very seriously before you do it, and it's all right. If you spend 5 years learning how to draw something, it is worth the effort. Ovals are what they are, and ellipses are another thing of what they are, circles and so forth. And so, oh, right behind you, you can see in the camera, is a painting that I did right here on the show a little while ago. It's these Japanese lanterns, and I went home and I refined this painting, which is... It didn't look like this when I worked on it, because I only did it for a half an hour, but this is what happens when you take these props and you work at them with time. This took me a rather long time, I must admit. It took me about 5 sessions of about 5 hours apiece. So that can tell you that painting can probably take you upwards of 25 or more hours to do. Anybody who thinks that you can knock these off in a half an hour, I will tell them differently. So, laying this out this way, I'm going to do this program probably in 2 sections. So I'm going to devote some time talking about composition and also the drawing of this particular setup of props, and also how you begin on a perfectly blank canvas and lay these things out, and then get into the business of applying the paint. Working from life, even though some people would contest this, is far easier than working either out of your memory or from other people's work, because all the information that you need is right there in front of you. You do not have to wonder, oh, what does that look like, because it's there. All right, the little ivy leaf that is sticking out is cutting out the shape of the lip of the kettle. And so when you work from life, this is the way to observe it and to place these objects so that you have absolutely no problem where the next one goes. Well, not absolutely no problem. I seem to infuriate people when I say that, because there are problems. There are always problems, especially when you're working in fine arts or in trying to do a what you might call recognizable art as opposed to abstract. There are a lot of abstract artists around, and more power to them. I don't understand it, and therefore I'm not going to talk about it. I understand the business of working in the realism fashion and in painting and drawing exactly what I see, hopefully in the correct proportion. This little leaf coming down here points to the spout. That's why it's placed that way. I'm not going to put all the points on it. The points can be done later. I'm just going to place them. This one is directly above it, and I'm probably going to be running out of space because, as I say, these things are very difficult proportionately to do. So, because I'm a master of improvising many, many times, as I'm doing today with some of these paints and brushes and so forth, I'm going to put these holly leaves in here, and maybe, well, I do seem to have enough room. There, yeah, yes, it's working. It's a little bit too high up for my taste to have it so high up on the canvas. I usually like to leave a little bit more breathing room so that framing doesn't cut out some of the painting. But if it does go up that high, so be it. So I've got these holly leaves, and I'm not doing a botanical drawing, I'm doing a composition. So I'm going to just put them in and maybe improvise a little bit on their general shape right now, just for the placement, because I want to be able to place the candle. As you can see, this leaf, I've got a little too far out. The candle should be absolutely vertical. Do not ever decide to do something which is a vertical and then not make it straight. It drives the viewer crazy to see something that is slightly off. It's very much like the horizon line. If you haven't got a horizon line that's perfectly horizontal, keep going at it until you do get it horizontal, because a landscape painting with a horizon that isn't horizontal is hard to take. I'm still using this dirty turpentine, and I'm just going to place the flame of the candle and the fact that it has been burning for a while, and therefore the candle is now flattened at the top instead of the way it is when you buy them, namely rounded. And the back of the kettle comes to this point on this brass candle. And of course, if the brass candle wasn't there, it would continue. So make sure that you can get the shape of it by realizing that it's not transparent, but that'll give you a good continuation of this particular line. All right, some more ivy interrupts this here. There's some going behind the candle and so forth, and this one is coming up here. And then the little Russian box, which I have, probably in deference to glasnost. These little Russian boxes I find are absolutely enchanting because they're so beautifully decorated. And here's another oval. Ellipse, as it is when it's flat, because this is a round box, but when you look at this angle, it becomes an oval or an ellipse. And the top of this box is just slightly higher than the lip of the tea kettle. So that the lip of the tea kettle is here and the box is slightly higher. That will give you the placement of this box. Little small pieces of information which I find are very not only justifiable but also fair to people who are trying to learn how to do this, and things that are perfectly normal to me may be very mysterious and very difficult to somebody who's just starting out. That's why I kind of concentrate on these little details, which may seem unimportant, but I think when you get down to the task of doing this, you'll find that it is very helpful. All of the decoration, of course, on this little jar, this little candy box, is going to be put on after the painting takes place. After the background takes place, it goes on afterwards. Now, the background, of course, is brilliant red. I have a little bit of a little lemon layout over here, which kind of is supposed to be, well, they're these lovely little round shapes that give some rhythm to the piece. Threes. Mozart worked with threes. Most people find that threes work very well, except the pair of lamps around the sofa. But threes are usually a very good idea. And 1, 2, 3 of these round shapes, and then I have 1, 2, 3 of these. That makes 6, and I would say that the 7th, which is we should always work in odd numbers, is the proliferation of all this ivy. Well, with this brush going to be retired because it's now lived its purpose, I'm going to take another red sable brush, which is a, well, it used to have a number on it, but the number, because the brush has been so used, has lost its number, but I believe it's a number 8. Red sable round brush, and I'm going to be working, I have squeezed some paint out on this piece of glass, which is a wonderful thing to do because it will clean like a champ when you need to have it clean. So as you can see, when you're working with this glass, I keep talking about different kinds of palettes. People can use any palette they want, but I've now cleaned the field. This is known as the field in palette talk. And when the field is clean, that means that you have the opportunity of mixing some very clean colors. I start with white. I'm going to begin with the kettle, which is a basic color of, well, it is very hard to define the color of copper because it reflects so many tones. But I'm going to start with the darker one down here, which is, and because a friend of mine said you are just so wrong not to tell people what you're using. All right, this is cadmium orange, a touch of white. I'm using a touch of purple, and that's it. I'm going to introduce some pale yellow and some white in here because it gets lighter as it goes around thing, and it needs a little bit of pink. So I'm going to use some pink in there, copper having a tremendous lot of pink tones in it. Blending with oil colors is obviously the reason that I use oils is because I insist upon blending, and you can see that when you blend this as carefully as I do, when it's wet, you can get smooth surfaces, which is the whole point of oil painting, to get the smooth surfaces that you need if you want to be realistic. I polished this copper before I came here, and that's why it's so nice and pink. Now, in the middle, here's the reflection of the copper, very brilliantly lit here in the studio lights, because, well, there are many, many of them overhead. In one's own private studio, I doubt very much as if there would be that much light cast, and certainly not 2. But I'm going to put on 2 because they're there, and I keep talking about painting what you see. So I've got 2 highlights going on this copper, and then, of course, the darker tone continues around the corner and blends up against this light area. I believe that maybe it would be an idea to break for just a moment while I find myself a cloth to wipe my brush on. So don't go away, I'll be right back. Back again. Let's continue with our little winter still life here with our lowly turnip and our glamorous piece of copper ware from Mr. Revere. Copper is difficult to paint, but it's absolutely enchanting and quite fascinating when you finally figure out how to do it. And so I thought maybe I'd try and play with this so that you would be able to see just what the problems are maybe in this short space of time, and then tackle it yourself. Everybody's got a piece of copper in the house. I just know it. I just know that out there's copper in the house that should be polished anyway, and you have a good excuse to polish the copper for the holidays and get it set up for a painting. Well, to get the highlights, there has to be one thing remembered. There are no highlights unless there are dark places, and the dark places are very important to find and to put on. We have gotten some shiny stuff going here because there's so much darkness. I'm going to give another shiny area in this little blemish, because this is a little pot that I found in the thrift shop, and paid very little for it, but it's very beautiful. It's not a teapot anymore, it doesn't have a handle anymore, but it certainly is a nice vase. And I am going to put the highlights right here on this little border, and that's not bright enough, so let's get it even brighter. Here, because the lights are just overhead, is where this is being picked up here, and it sort of blends along and it gets a little bit bright here, and then all of a sudden there is this kind of unfortunate, but I like it very much, little bump in it because it has gotten injured over the years, and it needs to be immortalized with its injury. So this little blemish is what interested me in using this as a pot. I paint broken pots and broken little things with cracks in them, and I very much like to find walls with cracks in them and see if I can possibly manage to show those, because they're very hard to do. So I'm going to get up here to where there's a highlight on the border, and the highlight is emphasized and is very, very bright because there is a shadow of the holly leaf directly next to it, which will show you just how bright that can get. The holly leaf is going to have some touch of alizarin crimson, a touch of green, some red, and a touch of sap green, and that's going to come right here, and it is so clear when I look at what I'm looking at that holly is casting the shadow so conveniently so that I don't have to even worry about it. And that's what I said earlier, that working from life is in many, many instances much easier than you think, because it's all there for you to grab as it happens. No imagination in the world would be able to know that this holly leaf is going to cast this kind of shadow, and it's what gives the three-dimensional quality to these paintings, or to the lessons that I'm doing, trying to show you the value of shadows cast by all these objects. Underneath here, underneath this holly, there is another bunch of shadows happening with the little points very clearly marked on the copper, and that is getting ready to receive the the painting of the leaf. Let me get to the spout for a minute. I'm going to get back to the mixture of white and orange, touch of the pink, and see if I can get the spout. The spout color is pretty even most of the time, except that it blends with whatever is on the outside. So the spout color, yeah, that's pretty even, and then the highlight will come. So actually, if you were to break it down into some formula and analyze what it is that makes that spout what it is that there is a tone, a single tone, and then there is the dark tone, which gets blended up because this bends underneath, this flows underneath, and then the application of the inside, which oddly enough, even though you'd think it was dark, it is actually light. It's probably because it's corroded. It seems to be a pale green. These are the things that to me are so interesting about working from life, that pale green inside there is because the copper has started to corrode. So let me put a little bit of that dark shadow that you saw, and there would be the inside. All details which are to be paid attention to when you're working from life. Let me get the nice color of the highlight, which is just pure orange and a touch, pure white and a touch of the orange, and to run it down, well, in a kind of an improvised way. So because we are, after all, trying to do fine arts here, not catalog illustration for the Williams-Sonoma catalog. We're trying to do a fine arts painting using Williams-Sonoma catalog items. If nobody knows what that is, it's one of the most dangerous magazines to have in the house because it's got things that you cannot resist. So I must say that the Williams-Sonoma is a very dangerous magazine, if there is such a thing. And here's a highlight. Let me put a more bright highlight here because there's a little rim that flows down there and throws a nice highlight on it. And right here there's another even brighter one than I'd put before. And let me see whether or not we can just get down here to where these pretty ridges are down at the bottom of this kettle. I put the highlights in first because I had them on my brush, and then continue, oops, a little bit darker please, a little bit more of the alizarin crimson and a little bit of the Van Dyke brown and orange, toning it all down with touches of sap green. Copper colors are hard to do. You've got to look at them and you've got to experiment, but I'm trying to give you as many of the colors that are used as possible. Over here on the side there is a lovely reflected light from the little jewel box. Over here, this little bright orange reflected light coming from the jewel box. Well, let's get to the let me get to the fruits, because those can probably be taken care of with a matter of maybe 2 or 3 colors. The turnip is some of this pink, which is called magenta in my on my tube, and it's magenta with a touch of white and a little bit of alizarin crimson to get the darkness, and maybe a touch of the brilliant and dark purple over on the side. Here's the alizarin crimson, and there is the purple. Quite dark, but blending rather rapidly, and it's very close to the color of the copper, but don't worry about that because that's what makes it mysterious, that the colors will in fact blend with one another. And here we have these, the dark, and I wiped my brush and I am blending these colors together. The wonderful fluidity and cooperation of oils is what this demonstrates, how the blending, once you have learned the technique, that the blending is really one of the things that makes people take up oils. Let me get a clean towel here. Okay, the white of the turnip is not really white, it's kind of off-white. It has a touch of green, but I'm going to put it right up against the mauve or purple or whatever you want to call it, and see that it turns darker, but that will come in a minute. The lowly turnip, I pick it for many reasons. It seems to have, for me, one of the perfect shapes, and then it's got this very amusing, whimsical tail, which almost makes it a comical piece. But the mauve, this is called a white turnip. Why they wouldn't call it a mauve turnip, I don't know, but it's known as a white turnip because when you cut it open, it has white meat inside. It's sweeter than the yellow ones, not as bitter as those ones that you find proverbially garnished with marshmallows at Thanksgiving. These are very sweet, to be not altered with terrible things like sugar and yuck. You just eat them boiled with salt and pepper and some butter, and heaven was never as charming as a wonderful boiled turnip, which I may find some people will question. But anyway, this little tail is casting a shadow underneath it, as you can see, there is a rather intense shadow under there. Shadows, I keep talking about shadows. They are vital to any kind of serious painting. I talk about them quite often because the three-dimensional quality is never obtained unless there is a shadow. So, because I'm dealing with circles and spheres and round things, it implies that doing vegetables is easy. Well, it isn't. But what it does is it gives a lesson on how to graduate from painting the common turnip to painting the human face. If you can, in fact, paint the form of a turnip with a tail coming out of it, such as it is here, a root, I shouldn't call it a tail, then you will find yourself slightly related to the fact that when you go to paint a portrait and there is a nose coming out of a face, casting shadows and so on, it isn't going to be like this in shape, but it is the same kind of observation that one needs. And many times I find that the programs that are being shown with sort of formulistic paintings do not deal with the business of observation. I see that this turnip has got a slight running of darker color that comes up here and meets the white, and that is what I call the insistent anatomy of an object. It insists upon being what it is, and I'm committed to paying attention to that insistence. All right, we have a rather perverse apple in the back. Apples are supposed to be red, but this one happens to be green, as you can see. The best kind, of course, for pies, as I suppose any person who bakes pies knows, but it also happens to be one of the best things for a still life composition. They are pure in form, absolute circles. I mean, they are spheres, balls. Balls have a wonderful way of behaving when they're in a composition. They make it pure. They make it so easy to understand. It isn't a frenetic and frantic little shape. It's a pure globe, and those things are absolutely unparalleled as far as design is concerned. Maybe that's why we like them so well, because our earth is shaped like a huge apple. It casts a shadow. The turnip is casting a shadow on the apple. It follows the contour of the apple, and it blends off into kind of a fuzzy blend. And that is this is also the same color that I can use to do the indentation of where the stem grows. So we haven't lost anything. We've managed to gain the use of the color on my brush. Also, it is slightly dark around here because the light is making it fall back into the shadows. So there's a slight thing there, but we do have a nice highlight to put in there, blended on the sides. As best you can, wipe your brush and blend that color. I hope that reflection. See, oh, that's better when I hold my hand if you don't see the terrible reflections of the shininess of the paint. That's what happens when you deal with oils shiny. Too bad. We'll try to accommodate the problem of the reflections. Okay, we have the stem that comes smartly into there. Does it cast a shadow in there? Okay, no, it casts some just funny little patterns coming out of there. Well, the apple has got three colors in it, really. The overall green, the highlight, and the shadow colors. All just very nicely blended, if possible, as smoothly as possible, because it is a smooth-skinned object. When you have something that is not smooth-skinned, you don't use the smoothing technique. So, behind that apple, there is a very dark part of this red velvet that I have brought into the studio, and it is probably not just alizarin crimson, but it's mixed with some cadmium purple, which I have on my palette today, and you'll find that it makes a wonderful accent for the brilliance of that apple. So I'm just going to put that in for the moment and see if I've got the right color scheme on the apple. Yeah, I'm going to clean up here a little bit and come back to you in just a moment and close up the show, and hope that you have gotten something out of this one, and I'm going to continue at another time. So with a little winter landscape half done, or maybe a little less than half done, I thank you for watching this program. Write to me if there's anything that I'm doing that is mystifying or that is good or bad. I'd be happy to hear from you at the address that is shown to you on the screen periodically here, 1600, yes, Motor Parkway in Hop Park. Patricia Windrow at the Cable Easel. Thanks for watching. Have a good evening.